It's Crossover Thursday here on the LockedOn Giants podcast as Luke Braun, host of LockedOn Vikings, and I get together and break down the key matchups, the key storylines, and how we think this game is going to play out between the Giants and the Vikings this weekend. It's all coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Crossover Thursday is presented by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is so much fun and so easy to play. There's no competing with other players. It's just you versus the projections available. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times the amount of your money on your entry. It can literally take less than 60 seconds to enter. It's that easy. We love Prize Picks, and we know you will too. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, and that promo code is LOCKEDON.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Podcast Network. It's Crossover Thursday on the Locked On NFL Network. Giants fans, hello. My name is Luke Braun. I do Locked On Vikings here with Pat Traina of Locked On Giants. Say hello to all of the Vikings fans listening. What's
up, everybody? Happy holidays.
And it will be a happy holiday for half of us, probably. This is a Christmas Eve game. Giants coming into US Bank Stadium in pretty good playoff position, thanks to that win against the Commanders. Vikings, of course, have already clinched their division. So not the stakes we maybe thought this would have a couple weeks ago, but still a lot to play for in terms of seeding and all of that. I guess to me, that sort of was going to be the headline. And now I think it's about a couple of these units and can they figure out their business before the playoffs? And the Giants haven't clinched anything yet either. So they still have to win a few more here, or what, one more, or what, is there a clinch scenario this week?
They need to win this week and have a combination of Detroit, Seattle, and Washington lose. I think 2 out of the 3 of them have to lose.
Got it. Well, I would love to see Detroit lose. They're too plucky. So there's a lot of stakes there. But to me, I think a lot of this too is about, can the Vikings figure out their business on defense? Their defense has struggled a ton this year. Can they figure out how to make this a unit that's worthy of going into the postseason? And I think kind of the same for the Giants offense. So tell me what's up there. What is going on with the Giants offense? It feels there's, I know, problems with the wide receivers. Are you guys happy with Daniel Jones? Give me the skinny.
Yeah. So Daniel Jones last week, first off, there hasn't been a more polarizing figure than Daniel Jones amongst Giant fans in recent years. Half of the fan base, believe it or not, hates him, doesn't want him back. And more people are starting to love him and appreciate him for what he's been able to do. Despite not having receivers, despite not having, a solid offensive line. But Daniel Jones has definitely made growth. He's definitely grown in this offense. Is he perfect? No. Is he in the class of a Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes? No. But he's a lot better than what he's been, and he's been able to get it done. Now, a lot of people say, well, so what? The Giants, what has Daniel Jones done exactly? He hasn't thrown for over 200 yards very often, certainly hasn't hit 300 yards. I think once he did it this season. What is it about him? Well, going back to what I said about not having a solid receiver core, not having a consistent offensive line, Daniel Jones has an 8-5-1 record. All right. He's not at the point where like Eli Manning was, where he totally elevated everybody around him, but he was able to get it done with these cards stacked against him. So that alone right there for the offense is huge. It's the defense though, that, as good as it played last week, the run defense for the Giants is still a problem. And it's been a problem all year long. And I don't know if they just...
With those guys? With Dexter Lawrence? Really?
Yeah. Well, the linebackers are probably the biggest problem. The fits, the run fits. But so the Giants are giving up gobs and gobs of rushing yardage on the ground. They're getting exposed primarily on the edges. Problem being is this, because of injuries and whatnot, they just don't have the firepower for the run fits. The chemistry is off. There's all kinds of issues. And then, they're trying to take some of the onus off of the back end of the defense, which has been ravaged by injuries. So the defense has been playing gritty. They've been playing they've been overachieving, and they delivered the goods last week against the Commanders, but still some problems on that unit that need to be addressed in the offseason.
It does feel like this wasn't supposed, like for both of these teams have overachieved their preseason expectations by a mile, right? And it kind of feels like these teams have been in the same lockstep where they're winning games, but then it's like a close one. And are they really that good? Are they as good as their record? And all of those questions. But here we are, both of these teams extremely likely to end up in the playoffs. I'm really interested to see how the Vikings attack that defense. And we'll get a little bit more into it when we talk about matchups with Justin Jefferson versus, I don't even know who's going to play for cornerback for you guys in this game, because Dory Jackson is probably out or already declared out.
I wouldn't expect the Dory Jackson.
Okay.
I don't think he's going to play this week.
So
it'll probably be Fabian Moreau, I would think. Would probably
Fabian Moreau.
Jefferson. Yeah.
He has certainly gone up against better dudes than that all year. And had success. So I'm curious to see what the Giants will do there. But there is just like that kind of, how will you handle the other guys' stars is, I think, going to be one of the true keys to this game. In particular, how the Vikings will handle Kayvon Thibodeau, because watching him, and I haven't seen a ton of Giants this year, but I did see him against the Commanders, and that was incredible. When anytime they were trying to read him out of the play on an option, anytime they left him unchained, he was making all sorts of plays using that athleticism. He was beating guys, getting all sorts of disruption. So how will the Vikings handle that? They will very likely be without their center for a third week in a row. Garrett Bradbury dealing with a back issue, got an fender bender that made it worse. Very unfortunate. But so they're going to be struggling with that on the offensive line. Will the Giants just let him go up against Christian Darrisaw all day? That would be a pretty cool matchup. Or will they try to move him around and do stuff? Those are the questions that I have. But on the other side of the ball, the Vikings have moved, or at least against the Colts, they moved to a ton more man coverage. They called man coverage, or at least cover one in particular, more than half the time against the Colts, which they've never done even close to that this year. And the corners could hold up on the outside against Alec Pierce and Ashton Doolin or whatever the Colts were putting out there. So I guess my question goes to you. I know the Giants have had a ton of problems with their receiver core. Do you have any faith in these guys to be able to get open against Patrick Peterson at his age and either Cam Dantzler or Duke Shelley, who both of them, Duke Shelley was cut earlier this year and Cam Dantzler's had his share of problems as well. The Vikings I feel like they're going to let these guys line up and play and go man to man. Do you think the Giants can take advantage?
I do. I actually do, believe it or not. Daniel Jones hasn't thrown a whole lot deep down the field. I think he's thrown, I want to say 20 attempts all season long. Part of that is because, as I mentioned earlier, the offensive line inconsistencies. But here's the thing, the short passing game's been working, but I think in this game, going against that Minnesota defensive secondary, which has struggled, as you pointed out, there's going to be opportunities. Now, we talk about receivers and getting open. And I know I've asked several people, I've asked coaches this, I've asked players this, what exactly does getting open mean? Is it 1 yard?
Yeah.
Is it 2 yards? Is it 5 yards?
Right.
What exactly does it mean? And the best
I think that depends on the quarterback. It's can you throw it, right?
Yes, exactly. The best answer I got is just getting enough to where you're in front of the ball and you're blocking out the defender. That's getting open and having the quarterback deliver the ball on target. Now, Daniel Jones, and I did this research yesterday for an article I wrote on Giants Country. Daniel Jones has been on target nearly 80% of his pass attempts. That is a career high for him. So just even if a receiver gets open 6 inches, if Daniel puts the ball on the money, chances are, that receiver is going to have a good chance of catching it. Now, dropping it is another story because I think his receivers have dropped something like 23 balls this season. Oh. So, putting it on the money is one thing, but the receivers got to do their part and haul it in.
Oh, 23. That is
something
gnarly.
like that.
So it seems like you really believe in the ability of Daniel Jones to take advantage of a secondary that, to put it lightly, has had some ups and downs this year.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, Daniel, like I said, nobody's going to mistake him for Mahomes or Allen or Joe Burrow or any of the top quarterbacks in the league. But he's a guy, and I've been saying this all along, he's a guy that the Giants can win with instead of in spite of. And there's a big
Okay.
difference in that. He's
Yeah.
people look at him and say, "Oh, he's a game manager." But look at what he has done over the last several weeks. He's basically put the team on his shoulders and tried to carry them. Now, has he been, perfect? Absolutely not. There's been plays that he's missed. There's been, mistakes that he's made. Last week against the Commanders, he went and he took off and maybe channeled some inner Josh Allen and thought he could truck over a defender and thus led with his head and shoulders. And I'm sitting there going, no,
Yeah.
don't do
Protect
that.
yourself.
You're going to get hurt. So, he does little things like that. But, I think all things considered, Brian Daboll, the head coach, Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, came in with the goal. One of their goals was to fix what ailed Daniel Jones. I think they have made significant progress with that. And credit has to go to Daniel Jones because, they basically said to him at the start of the spring and the summer, just attempt throws. Don't worry about getting picked off. Don't worry about mistakes. Just let's see what throws you can make and what throws you can't make. And I think that helps set the stage for where Daniel Jones is right now in his development.
I'm excited to see what you're talking about there, because last time the Vikings played Daniel Jones, it was 2019. It was his rookie year, and it was not that good. So I haven't paid too much attention to Daniel Jones, and I'm interested to see what comes out. All I know I know him as more of a runner than anything, which is probably really wrong. Let's talk about how some of these matchups will play out then. Some of these wide receiver corner matchups on both sides of the ball. I want to ask you more about Kayvon Thibodeau. So we'll get into that, and then we'll also get into, of course, at the end of the show, our predictions.
This episode of the LockedOn Giants podcast is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find an episode of The League available as a bonus episode on the LockedOn NFL podcast. Narrated by Super Bowl champion and legendary smack talker Richard Sherman and sports broadcaster and rising star Taylor Rooks, The League is an 8-part docuseries about the most bizarre, inspirational, and unlikely stories connected to America's favorite sport, pro football. You won't want to miss these untold stories spanning from the 1940s to the present. Head on over to Locked On NFL to hear the bonus episode or catch the full series available anywhere you get your podcasts. Audible, get in the game. Hey, Giant fans, thank you for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less. Plus, get instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
Pat, let's talk about some of these matchups. And I'm very excited about the possibility of Kayvon Thibodeau versus Christian Darrisaw. So my question is, A, how do they use Thibodeau? Do they move him around, or is he the kind of guy that lines up in one spot, goes up against the same guy all day and sets him up and knocks him down? And how does he deal with particularly strong tackles? Because that's what Christian Darrisaw is. He's a very strong guy. He's got plenty of mobility as well. He's been playing at a totally elite level. But he's in particular, once he gets his mitts on you, he can throw you out of the club like your DJ Jazzy Jeff. So how does Kayvon Thibodeau hold up to that kind of play, if he even will? Or is he going to move around the formation a whole bunch and go up against our backup center all day?
Yeah, so I think what Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator, tries to do is he tries to get the advantage in matchups. So if that means moving guys around, he will do that. Ideally, you'd like to kind of have the same guy going up against the same guy, but excuse me, that's not practical in an NFL game. So the thing with Kayvon Thibodeau is the game has started to slow down for him significantly. I mean, he won't admit to it, but earlier in the year, remember, he missed the first 2 games because of the knee injury. Then he came back and,
Right.
it was like his hair was on fire. Everything was spinning. And as he, got more and more reps, the game started slowing down. And I'd be remiss also if I didn't mention the return of Azeez Ojulari kind of helped him out too, which I'll get to in a moment. But with Thibodeau, the thing with him is, you know, he's always won, I think, on his athleticism. That's how he's been successful. He doesn't really have an accomplished toolbox of, say, counter moves in the pass rush. So if he gets stonewalled, sometimes, that's it. That's all she wrote. So the advantage now of having Azeez Ojulari back is it creates a pick your poison type of scenario.
Right.
Ojulari has had a sack, or I should say at least a half a sack in his last 4 games. And, when you have a pick your poison type of scenario on either side, one guy's going to get doubled up. The other guy's going to have to
Right. Where do you slide it?
Right. He's basically going to have to, win his one-on-one. I think Kayvon Thibodeau can win his one-on-ones. He's starting to develop counter moves. They're not quite, where you want them to be, but look, the promise is there. The ceiling for this kid is sky high. And, like I said, having Ojulari in there, and then you throw in Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams up front who are pushing the pocket. The Giants haven't had this good of a pass rush in quite some time. And hallelujah, because that's how they won the Super Bowls, the 2007 Super Bowl, 2011 Super Bowl. They had a deep pass rush, and they got it done.
Go back to, what was it, 90? The Bill Parcells year was, like Lawrence Taylor and stuff, right? Go back all the way.
86 and 1990. Lawrence Taylor,
yeah,
that was another good pass rush. I mean, look at the history of the Giants Super Bowls.
the identity. It's what I think of when I think Giants.
Yeah. So absolutely.
Well, sounds like Andre Patterson's doing a pretty good job over there then.
Yes.
We loved him over here. I mean, it was time, like we had to clear out the whole staff, but certainly no hard feelings. I love Andre Patterson. It's interesting. The Vikings on their offensive line, the tackles are the strong point. I mean, those guys are bookend, and it's the interior where we've had most problems. Although Ezra Cleveland's had a really solid year. Rookie right guard Ed Ingram is coming along. He's definitely had his ups and downs. And of course, we got backup center, and Garrett Bradbury has famously had his issues throughout his career too. But Christian Darrisaw, I think he should be an all-pro. Brian O'Neill, all very good, I guess, team this year. So I'm curious to see if that is the matchup, or if the Giants just say, nope, we're just going to make Austin Schlottman's day the worst day in the entire world. You want to flip to the secondary, though? What is the one? Is there like a wide receiver corner matchup you're super looking up to, or anything else?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Justin Jefferson versus, I think it's going to be Fabian Moreau. Nick McLeod is the other cornerback for the Giants. Adoree Jackson is probably not going to play this weekend. He's still coming off of that knee issue that suffered on a ill-advised punt return. Which
seems like y'all are pretty bad about that.
Yeah, it drives me crazy. I'm old enough to remember Jason Sehorn, and I realize you can't coach scared, but you also got to coach smart. But anyway, so the starting corners should be Nick McLeod and Fabian Moreau. I think Moreau, who's been around a little bit longer than Nick McLeod, is going to draw Justin Jefferson. That matchup worries me. Jefferson is just so good. He's such a good route runner. He's so shifty and elusive, and he just does things that you think your eyes going to the left, and all of a sudden he's going to the right, and he's just so tough to defend. And I'm curious to see if the Giants bracket him with coverage. Do they put a safety over the top? Because Moreau has been kind of up and down with his coverage. A couple of weeks ago, he got toasted by the Eagles. He had Terry McLaurin going back a couple of weeks before that, who absolutely burned him. So I'm thinking the Giants might go with bracket coverage. Now, that then leaves Adam Thielen to do his thing. So I talk about pick your poison. And I think the Vikings have, 3 very good receivers there. And it's like, okay, which one do we as the Giants double up? I think it's got to be Jefferson, and you got to take your one-on-one chances maybe with the rest of them.
Right, and you could even try the Belichick way, which would be to put like Fabian Moreau on Adam Thielen, and then have Nick McLeod do the bottom part of the bracket because he'll have the safety help anyways. Maybe you do it that way. I don't think since maybe Chicago, which barely knows how to walk, have we seen somebody just like take Justin Jefferson on. I mean, even the Jets didn't do it. They have Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, a couple of great corners, and even they had safety help over the top of him all the time. It's just the treatment that he gets. And the Vikings have started to even like bank on this by designing concepts that require Justin Jefferson to like clear out a safety that, rely on, if that safety flows with Jefferson, this should be wide open, leak and stuff like that. I am curious to see if the Giants just leave Moreau on Justin Jefferson. I think that would be a really bad idea. At least give him some safety help and make the Vikings scheme some stuff open. I also just want to shout out KJ Osborne, who got like 140 some yards against the Colts and was really the spark to that big comeback that I'm sure everybody watched. He coming out of the slot or not, coming out of stacks and stuff, he has been no slouch as well. And that banged up secondary, I'm hoping for my sake that the Vikings can find a way to really victimize it, especially if Wink Martindale wants to blitz a lot, which I know he's Wink Martindale, like that's what he's known for. But that's going to leave one-on-ones on the outside. And I feel like that might be a key to this one is, can the Vikings kind of pick up those blitzes? Because if they can, it's going to really expose that like kind of soft underbelly in the secondary. What about on the other side, though? Who do you think threatens this Vikings secondary the most? The Vikings will probably put their corners field and boundary. They'll have Patrick Peterson on the boundary. Whoever else plays, we're not quite sure if it's going to be Shelley or Dantzler on the field side. So you will know where that corner is. You can put whatever wide receiver you want out there on the lesser of the two cornerbacks. Who is it? Slayton? Is it putting Slayton in the slot? How do you think the Giants will attack?
I think if they're going to go deep, Slayton is their best option. He is their deep threat right now. When he is on, Slayton can actually be pretty good, but he's inconsistent. He had a drop last week. He's had a couple of long receptions that have looked good. I mean, I like Slayton. Slayton is a kid who has been through a lot. He had to take a pay cut at the start of the season. There was some question as to whether he would even be on the roster. And here he is, he kept his mouth shut, showed up, went to work, always accessible, just the sweetest person. And just, he takes care of business. And I respect that in him. That said, I think if the Giants had their original plan of Kenny Golladay and Sterling Shepard and Kadarius Toney, I don't think Slayton would be seeing a whole lot of balls thrown his way. And, we know the story, what happened with Golladay and Toney and Shepard. And, here we are, the Giants are in a position to where they desperately need to upgrade the receiver position. But Slayton right now is their deep threat. Richie James is probably more of their slot guy. He's a guy who can be very shifty. And what a comeback story by him, by the way. A couple of games ago, after I think, week 8 it was, when he had the 2 fumbles, everybody was ready to throw him to the curb, because they were like, he's a bum. He can't hold on to the ball. What good is he? Richie James went back to work. And last week, I think he was the receiving yardage leader for the Giants. And this is what he's been doing all year long since signing with the Giants. It's just putting his head down, going to work, and showing the coaches that he's worthy of snaps. So I think you see Richie James in the slot. Darius Slayton will be outside. And then I would think Marcus Johnson and Isaiah Hodgins. Isaiah Hodgins is a guy who I really like. And he's somebody that the Giants picked off the scrap heap. I think he was with Buffalo prior. Came in, and he has developed into a nice outside potential deep threat for the Giants. So those are the guys I would say keep an eye on and where I think they're going to line up.
Yeah, that could be just like enough of a threat. I mean, we've got Duke Shelley picked off the scrap heap as well. So this could be where, the tipping point of the game is. But we should probably get into those predictions. Last I checked BetOnline, I'll check it again real quick here. But last I checked BetOnline, it was the Vikings favored by 4 points. So we'll check on that, and we will do our predictions coming up.
BetOnline is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game, both college and NFL. And BetOnline doesn't stop there. It's your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including NBA, NHL, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the games start. Hey, Giant fans, I got an important message for you right now. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes too many. And as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. And then you're like, nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's not a big deal. What are the odds you're going to get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill somebody. Well, everybody knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think it's okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over.
Moving on with Crossover Thursday here with Pat Traina of Locked On Giants. I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings. Let's get into the predictions. You may have the honor of going first. Right now, the line at BetOnline is Vikings -4. Over-under is 47.5. So that implies like a 23-27 kind of game. Or a little bit less than that, I guess. Like a 26-22, I think is what that actually is. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think I would go with the under. The Giants offense just
Yeah.
can't score. You know, they basically I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look, but they haven't scored over 25 points very often this season. The Vikings offense obviously can explode. I mean, as evidenced by that great comeback that they
Right.
had last week, which was quite something, by the way.
Excellent.
I'm going to go with the Giants on this one. I know that the stadium up there gets really loud. It can be a problem for visiting teams, but look, the Giants are so close to a playoff berth. They win, and then they should be able to get some help from the other three teams that I mentioned. They only need two of the three, I think, to lose their games. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the Commanders have the 49ers, and I think I want to say Seattle has Kansas City, and I think the Lions have Carolina. So you
Right.
would think that there would be two losses amongst those three that should help the Giants get in, but they're so close to their goal.
Yeah, you got 3 weeks
getting
too.
postseason. So I'm going to go Giants, but I'm going to say, gosh, I hate picking scores because I never get them right. I come close, but I never get them right.
It's yeah.
I'm gonna say the Giants cover the spread. How about
Okay.
that? Do I have to give a score?
Right. Well, you have a Giants win and you have the under. I'll take that.
I had the
like
under,
that.
and
Let's screw the
Giants
score.
I think the Giants, I think the Vikings will not cover the spread. Let's put it that way. I think
Got
it'll
it.
be a little closer.
So I am going the opposite way here because I as much as Darius Slayton has progressed in all the stories and Isaiah Hodgins and all of that stuff, I think the Vikings defense may have figured out a way as long as you don't have stud receivers. And this is not the team that's going to present that challenge. So I'm going to go with the Vikings win. Over-under is a little bit tough because the Vikings have hit their overs a lot this year because that defense has been so bad and they've let people in. Here's what I tell every fan base. If this game starts out catastrophically for you, if you couple drives, you're down 14-0, bad first quarter, that kind of thing, don't turn that dial because anything can happen in a Vikings game. They let the Bears come back from 21-3 earlier in the season. And by the way, just because you mentioned it, I did look up the Giants season here. They haven't scored more than 24 points once this season, and that was the London game against the Packers. Otherwise 24, which was 27. That's the most. So yeah, struggling offense. If the Vikings have figured out their defense with this man coverage thing, I think that can work. I'll still take the over just because of precedent. I'll give it one more game of this man coverage thing before I fully buy into it. but also because of the problems in that Giants secondary and Justin Jefferson and Thielen and Osborne, it just feels like the way that these Giants are built, I just like the way they match up with my Vikings. And Kayvon Thibodeau coming off the edge is going to be the hardest thing for him. And so that's going to take him out of where he's most used to being. And like for the Giants to find a way to win, they're going to have to work a little bit harder than they would against teams that are structured differently, like, teams with problems at tackle, but a good interior, teams, with maybe a good running game but less of, good outside receivers, that kind of thing. The Vikings run game has struggled a lot though. So the problems you've mentioned in run defense, they might not come to fruition. So that I think might be one thing that does favor the Giants, but I'm going to say over. Vikings win, Vikings cover. I'll just go fully opposite, and we'll see how it plays out.
Absolutely. I mean, they're coming off of a big historic comeback from behind win. And let me ask you something before we wrap up the show. How have they responded in the days after that? Are they still riding that euphoria, or are they, have they put their nose to the grindstone? Because the Vikings, even though they're in the playoffs, they have an opportunity to make ground on the Eagles, or to at least stay pace with the Eagles for that number one
He's
seed.
hurt. If Hurts is hurt, yeah. They kind of learned this lesson when they beat the Bills. That Bills game, you might remember, that crazy game. That was the emotional high. They were riding that for like 3 days, came out totally flat, and got absolutely shellacked by the Cowboys, 40-3 the next week. This one, the feeling is different. It was euphoria in the locker room after the Bills. And it was this sort of disbelief, this surrealness. People who covered the Minneapolis Miracle said it felt like the locker room after that. We were like, oh my God, how did we get away with that? And just this total ecstatic thing. This one was more emotional. It was just like the vibe was we all just believe in each other so much. And you had guys getting choked up in the locker room afterwards. It was a little bit more subdued. And it was more about like, gosh, look at this special group. I love you guys so much. And it was like bringing everybody together. I don't know if that means a worse or a better hangover, but it certainly is different. But hopefully they've learned that sort of emotional hangover lesson the last time they won a completely insane game that everybody's going to talk about for years. Hey, we'll see which one of us is right. If you want to, I always tell Vikings fans, go listen to Locked On Giants, go listen to the whole week's worth of it. Giants fans, come on down. You're welcome to come hang out as well. Go get the scout on, right? Get yourself nice and informed so you can talk circles around all your buddies or your family, I guess, on Christmas Eve when this game will be played. Thank you so much, Pat Traina, Locked On Giants. I'm Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings. See you next time on the Locked On NFL crossover